2 years ago, Beneteau launched a trawler flagship that went on to win the European Powerboat Award in its category. That boat had a 4-year production run, sold 27 hulls, and by any normal shipyard, math still had years of life left in it. This year, Beneteau killed it anyway and replaced it with something bigger, quieter, and more expensive, and they're debuting it inside the Venetian Arsenal at the Venice Boat Show. That is not a routine model refresh. That is the world's largest boat builder telling the entire trawler market that 4 years is now considered old. Beneteau is doing this in the same year its parent company's overall revenue dropped nearly a fifth, then roared back with a 30% jump in a single quarter. So by the end of this video, you're going to understand why a company that just took an 18% hit to its top line decided this was the exact moment to retire a winning boat, and why that decision should worry every trawler builder that's still running a slower product cycle. This isn't a rumor pulled off a forum or a leaked spec sheet. This is Beneteau's own product materials, a boat show calendar entry, and Group Beneteau's own investor filings, all pointing at the same conclusion from 3 different directions. Let's start with the boat itself, then work outward into the numbers that explain why it exists. The Grand Trawler 63 is Beneteau's new flagship long-range cruiser, and it is the direct successor to the Grand Trawler 62, a boat that only entered production in 2022 and only built 27 hulls. For context, that 62 wasn't a flop being quietly retired. It won the European Powerboat Award in the displacement category, which is the trawler world's version of a Critics' Prize. Most builders leave a winning flagship alone for a decade. Beneteau gave it 4 years and moved on, and when you look at what replaced it, you start to understand why they didn't wait. The 63 measures just under 19 meters, or 62 feet 2 inches, with a beam of nearly 18 feet and a full displacement hull designed by MICAD Naval Architects, the same naval architecture house behind the 62. The interior comes from Nauta Design. Power is twin-man A6730 diesels, 730 horsepower each, on straight shaft drives. And here's the detail that tells you Beneteau wasn't just tweaking the old boat, they re-engineered the entire helm experience. The 62 ran hydraulic steering. The 63 switches to a new Zenta electric steering system, paired with joystick control and floating multifunction display screens borrowed from the design language of the Swift Trawler 54. That's not lipstick on an old hull. That's a builder deciding the previous generation's control systems were already outdated after 4 years. Then there's the range and comfort story, which is really the whole reason anyone buys a trawler in the first place. Beneteau states the 63 will cruise up to 900 to 1,000 nautical miles at 9 knots, with a 10% fuel reserve still in the tank, depending on load and configuration. Sleipner fin stabilizers, which used to be an option, are now standard equipment, along with AGM service batteries, the Lux interior package, and a factory spares box for the MAN engines. Beneteau's own messaging is explicit about this. What used to be optional on the 62 is now simply included on the 63. And for owners who want to disappear off the grid entirely, there's an optional silent boat pack, adding a lithium-ion battery bank, solar panels integrated into the Flybridge hardtop and coach roof, and a Victron smart solar system, enough capacity that the boat can run air conditioning at anchor without the generator running. The goal, according to the 63's product manager, is a boat quiet enough that owners forget the engine room exists. Layout-wise, buyers get 3 or 4 cabin configurations, a full-beam owner's stateroom aft, and a Flybridge Beneteau is calling one of the largest in its market segment, with a U-shaped dining area for 8, an inward-facing wet bar, and an optional tender crane. The base price sits at roughly 2.37 million US dollars, or about 2.76 million euros before options, and the boat is built at Beneteau's Monfalcone shipyard in Italy, the same facility responsible for the 62. It makes its formal show debut in Venice this year, inside the historic Arsenal, before heading to other major European and US boat shows through the rest of 2026. And the Grand Trawler 63 isn't the only place this acceleration is showing up. Just weeks before the Venice debut, at the multi-hull show in La Grande Motte on April 22nd this year, Beneteau announced the creation of Electromarine, a joint venture with rival builder Fontaine-Pajot to standardize alternative propulsion and onboard energy systems across sailing yachts. That alliance already brings together 7 monohull and multi-hull brands representing close to 60% of the sailing market, with a stated target of 10 to 15% electric propulsion adoption by 2030. On its own, that's a sailing side story, not a trawler story. But put next to the Grand Trawler 63, it tells you this isn't one division making one aggressive call. It's a company-wide doctrine. Move fast, move first, and drag the rest of the market along by sheer scale. Beneteau operates 16 production sites and employs more than 6,400 people across France, the United States, Poland, Italy, Portugal, and Tunisia, building more than 135 models across 9 brands. When a company with that much manufacturing weight decides to compress its own product cycles, it isn't just updating a boat, it's resetting the clock speed the entire industry gets measured against. Now here's where this stops being a boat story and becomes a business story. Because the Grand Trawler 63 is not an isolated decision. It's one soldier in a much bigger campaign, and understanding that campaign is the only way to understand why Beneteau retired a prize-winning flagship after only 4 years. Go back to March of this year, when Beneteau Group reported its full year 2025 results. The number was ugly. Group revenue fell to 849 million euros, down from just over 1 billion euros the year before, a contraction of roughly 18%. The first half of 2025 alone saw revenue drop 27% at constant currency. That is not a rounding error. That is a company getting hit hard by a soft recreational boating market, and if you'd stop the story there, this would sound like a company in retreat, cutting flagships to save money, not replacing them with more expensive ones. But that's exactly backwards from what actually happened. And it's the twist that makes this whole announcement make sense. Instead of pulling back, Beneteau did the opposite. In 2025, in the middle of that revenue collapse, the group launched 23 new boat models across its brands, not delayed them, launched them into a shrinking market. And the bet paid off in a way that shows up cleanly in the numbers. Order intake for 2025 rose 24% year over year, even as revenue fell, because buyers were responding to new products faster than the old fleet could sell. Group CEO Bruno Tivoyan has been direct about the logic, saying the group's strategy to promote innovation and accelerate model launches is what the first quarter growth in 2026 has validated, and that the plan is to keep launching at the same pace this year. Then came the receipt for that strategy. Q1 2026 revenue landed at 169.5 million euros, up 30.1% year over year, with the motor division, the division that includes the Grand Trawler line, up more than 45% at constant currency. North and Central America revenue alone jumped over 100% year over year, partly from deliveries that had been delayed out of 2025, but even stripping that out, growth in the region topped 30%. Break the quarter down further and the picture gets even more specific. The motor division, which is where the Grand Trawler lives alongside Beneteau's Prestige and Gran Turismo lines, posted revenue of 96.9 million euros, up 45.2% at constant currency, the single strongest performer in the group. The sailing division came in at 63.7 million euros, up 18.6%, helped by a 22% rebound in sales to charter operators. Regionally, Europe stayed the group's largest market at 84.4 million euros, up 16%, while North and Central America nearly doubled. None of that growth happened by accident in a market that was still down double digits 12 months earlier. It happened because the group had new products sitting on showroom floors and boat show docks at the exact moment demand started returning, instead of waiting for a downturn to fully clear before investing in anything new. So look at what actually happened here, laid end to end. Beneteau took an 18% revenue hit in a down year. Rather than slow down and protect cash the way a nervous builder would, they accelerated their launch calendar, betting that new product would pull buyers away from a soft market faster than old inventory could. 23 new models is not a boat company being cautious. 24 more are already planned for 2026. And the Grand Trawler 63, arriving with a flagship price tag north of $2.3 million, is proof the strategy extends all the way to the top of the range, not just the entry-level dayboats where you'd expect a company to chase volume during a downturn. Retiring a European Powerboat Award winner after only 27 hulls only makes sense if you already know your next flagship is going to outsell it. In Beneteau's order book, up nearly 10% at constant currency heading into the second half of this year suggests they think it will. There is a real risk sitting inside this story too, and it's worth naming instead of glossing over, because it's the reason this bet isn't a sure thing. Beneteau's own reporting flags a marked slowdown in new order intake beginning in March 2026, tied to the conflict in the Middle East and its ripple effects on buyer confidence in a discretionary high-ticket category like long-range motor yachts. The group has said its full-year outlook depends on that geopolitical situation improving before the second half closes. In other words, Beneteau is betting a flagship replacement, an accelerated 24-model launch calendar, and a fresh factory investment in Monfalcone on a recovery that isn't fully locked in yet. That's not a small bet for a company that just came off an 18% down year. But here's why the trawler segment specifically should be paying attention, regardless of how that macro bet plays out. Beneteau's Swift trawler family, the line the Grand Trawler sits at the top of, has sold more than 1,300 boats since it was introduced in 2004, spanning 22 years and at various points, 17 different models. The current in-production range alone runs from the compact 30-footer up through the 37, the 41, the 48, and the 54, before topping out at the Grand Trawler 63. That's not a niche builder's total production run. That's the volume of an entire competing trawler brand's entire history, sold under one nameplate by a company that also builds sailboats, catamarans, and express cruisers across 9 total brands and 135 total models. When a builder with that kind of scale decides 4 years is the new product cycle for a flagship trawler, every smaller independent builder in the segment, the ones still running 7, 10, 15-year model cycles, because that's what the category has always done, has to ask themselves whether they can survive a world where the market leader refreshes its top boat before the paint has fully cured on the last one. A buyer shopping a mid-6-figure or low 7-figure trawler in 2026 now has to factor resale value against a company that has openly signaled it will not let its own flagship sit still for long. So here's where I'll leave it, because the honest version of this story doesn't have a clean bow on it yet. Beneteau is mid-bet. The Grand Trawler 63 is real, it's priced, it's built, and it's debuting in Venice this year. The 2025 revenue drop is real. The 2026 rebound is real so far, and the geopolitical risk hanging over the rest of this year's order book is real too. What we don't know yet is whether accelerating the launch cycle on a flagship this expensive is going to look like genius or overreach 12 months from now, when the group reports its next full set of half-year numbers this September. And it's worth remembering that this isn't Beneteau's first time running this exact playbook. The Swift Trawler 54 replaced its predecessor using the same logic, the same shipyard discipline, the same insistence that whatever launched last year is already the baseline the next model has to beat. The Grand Trawler 63 borrows its redesigned helm straight from that 54, which means the company isn't just iterating boat by boat, it's compounding lessons across the entire motor yacht range in real time. The same way its Electra Propulsion Alliance is compounding lessons across every sailing brand it touches. That compounding effect is quietly the most dangerous part of this story for competitors, because it means Beneteau's next flagship, whatever it ends up being called, starts from a higher baseline than this one did. Tell me in the comments, does a 4-year flagship cycle sound like healthy innovation to you? Or does it sound like planned obsolescence dressed up in teak and Sleipner fittings? And if you're actually in the market at this price point, would you rather own the boat that just won an award or the boat that made it obsolete? I'll be watching Beneteau's September half-year numbers closely, because that's when we'll find out whether this bet actually worked. Until then, fair winds and following seas.